Welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Randi Zinn. I'm a mother, an author, and an entrepreneur who is committed to and curious about living a life that is always evolving. This is a lifestyle podcast covering health, both body and mind, self-care, why it is a necessity, and how tough it can be to master, entrepreneurship, its ups and downs, cultural disruption, and the topics we sometimes avoid, as well as love, sex, friendship, and more. This podcast is a place and a community for people who are willing to do the hard work of growth, who want the tools and inspiration to step into it, and who want to grow each and every day of their lives. I interview movement makers, leaders, survivors, writers, and founders. Their stories move me and will move you to cultivate more strength and clarity during every step of your day. Enjoy today's episode, and thanks for spending time with me at this very special place in my life over here at the Going Beyond podcast. Hey, and welcome to the Going Beyond podcast. Randi here. I'm psyched you're taking time to be with yourself, to listen, to be inspired, and to join me for another fantastic conversation. So those of you that know, I love to scope out places where I know I'm going to find some interesting people. And today's interview is the result of one of those moments. It was the summertime. Those of you know, in the summer, I usually camp out up in the Hudson Valley with my kids up in the country. And I don't usually step foot into the city unless I have to. Well, it turns out that my friend Bex Barucki was launching one of her next book. And I was like, okay, I got to be there because I know that Bex is always bringing amazing women into the room. And she had this fantastic discussion and panel. And today's guest was on that panel. And so I was like, okay, that's a lady I need to talk to. And she's here with me today, and her name is Elizabeth DiAlto. So, hey.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm psyched that you're here. I always know that when I follow that gut instinct to approach someone like I did with you right after a panel and just say hey, you want to be on my podcast? And you're like, yeah, let's do it. And it's just always is something I'm so glad I follow. So let me just do a little bit of the traditional bio for Elizabeth, and then we're just going to get right into this because
cool.
I think it's going to be a good discussion today. So Elizabeth is known for her raw, honest, and grounded approach to self-help and spirituality. And I will say that is what I was very much drawn to in your expression of women and the subjects that we're talking about that night, about diversity and about women's power. And I was like, yes, we speak the same language. Elizabeth is a practical mystic, the creator of Wild Soul Movement, and author, and the host of the popular Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto podcast. She's been a teacher, leader, speaker, coach, and trainer to groups and individuals for more than 15 years in multiple industries. Elizabeth works with women internationally through her digital programs and speaking engagements, and more intimately through in-person intensives, retreats, workshops, Wild Soul Movement teacher trainings, and occasional one-on-one engagements. Her greatest mission in this life is to help those who identify as women worldwide to reclaim and redefine their own womanhood and contribute to a new paradigm of culture where it is both safe and natural for women to love, trust, and accept themselves fully.
Woohoo!
That is a breathful.
Yeah, I know. I'm always every time I am there when someone reads it, I'm like, I got to write an abbreviated bio.
Actually, I just feel like I want to take a breath on it because it feels so major and so important. And I really resonate with your mission because I feel very similarly about my own mission. So I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
So I don't think you need to change it too much unless you want the literally one sentence one.
No. And it is because, right, part of it is honoring being we're dynamic beings. When people are like, what do you do? I'm like, you take that big inhale. You're like, well, how much time you got?
Exactly. And when people are like, so what are you about? And I'm like, I don't want to sound too lofty, but I really want to change the way women see themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's how much time? Or sometimes I'll change it. I can tell this man was talking to me. I was out dancing the other night. He's like, so what do you do? And I was just like, I'm a life coach.
Right.
When I don't really feel like engaging, I'll say something so oversimplified and be like, that's it.
I know. I'm actually kind of glad I have a podcast now because I can be like, I have a podcast.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's like people can land on that.
totally. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you know what? I will say this. I will say that you have to use the tools and the things that are out there now as modes and methods to express that deeper truth. And that's great.
Yeah.
It is great. Okay. So, Elizabeth, I want to say sort of like screw the bio. We love the bio, but like, let's just get into this. So, you talk a lot about embodiment, and I want to talk about embodiment for women. And like, maybe let's just start with why it's so hard to be embodied.
Our culture really values logic, rationale, and like structured linear thinking and achievement much more than it does creativity, art, expression, intuition, connection to an integration of like nature and natural forces. So for most people, it's just a function of a lack of training, lack of awareness, lack of practice, lack of value, reverence, care, energy, and attention on this beautiful aspect and practice in our lives. So most people I meet, unless they had like a parent or a highly influential caretaker who really was very embodied, right? Engaged with their senses or had some kind of movement practice or was like a dancer or something or like very like earthy kind of person, most people aren't like this. Most people are just like functioning out of their minds, trying to figure things out with their mental energy and their mental space. And so it's for most folks, it's really just a lack of awareness that this is even a thing and just how much is available through embodiment practice.
I think of my own children, and there's no question that we're born embodied. I mean, my kids like love to just get naked and dance around and move and somersault and laugh. And it's so joyful.
Mm-hmm.
It's so amazing. I mean, that's our true form.
Yeah. And also part of it embodied is your emotions can just freely move through you because you haven't constructed all these blockages and like mental judgments about them. So especially kids who are like pre-verbal and, before prefrontal cortex and emotional intelligence and cognition really develops, it's so amazing. I have a little 16-month-old niece and it's cool. When she's hungry or when she needs something, whatever, she just cries or she points to it. You know what I mean? There's no self-consciousness about her desires. There's no like, I shouldn't be eating because I just had lunch. I shouldn't want a snack because I just have lunch. No one cares. She wants the granola bar. She points to the friggin' granola bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So why embodiment for you? What got you there?
I was always directed towards the body because there was so much attention and focus put on my body. I started developing in the 3rd grade. I started growing breasts. By the 5th grade, I'd had my first period. By the time I was 12, like grown ass men were hitting on me, thinking I was like at least 16 or 17 years old. So there was just like so much attention on my body. I started paying a lot of attention to it myself. I also had real like sexual impulses quite early that, I didn't deny. I started masturbating probably when I was like 10 years old. I don't know. So super fascinated with the body. A lot of it came through athletics and exercise at first. And then in my 20s, I became a Zumba instructor. I started learning salsa dancing. I took some pole dancing classes. And then I got into the more like sensual aspect of movement practice. And that is what really awakened me to all the wisdom in the body that's available to you when you engage with your senses. And so at that point, I had been a personal trainer and I was creating fitness programs and training people and teaching classes. And I'm also like there's a word for it that I really appreciate. It's autodidact, like very self-taught, like always reading like 3 or 4 books at a time, super fascinated with all kinds of topics in, psychology, spirituality, energy healing, esoteric things, ancient wisdom and traditions and things like this. And I like to synthesize things. I like to integrate things and weave them together and see how they complement each other. So all these things kind of really started coming together for me in my 20s. And that's how I ultimately ended up developing my body of work, Wild Soul Movement. But it was just like a lot of following the crumbs along the way of like literally what my body and my soul were like dropping in my path in ways that I couldn't even ignore if I wanted to.
Did you feel like that early attention on your body and that early entree into people noticing you as sexual, maybe before you were even mentally or physically ready for that attention, did that translate as negative, or do you feel like it was part of what sort of created that pathway for you to explore?
It was super conflicting. And I didn't realize how conflicting it was until later on when I started doing some healing work around other things. But it was conflicting. And I specifically remember this one thing. When I was in the 7th grade, all of our guy friends got together and they ranked all of our girlfriends by category. They literally broke us down by body part and then personality and intelligence, maybe. And then they let us know how we did.
Ay, ay, ay.
And I won. And it was funny. It was interesting because one of my friends was like the most beautiful, like she was the one that everyone was in love with. So when they even told us they did this, we were all like, so-and-so must have definitely won. So I remember when they told me that I did, feeling all these conflicting things, like, okay, I'm proud of myself. Cool. I won. Who doesn't love winning things? But then also like, excuse me, you all broke us. Like it was the most, I didn't have the language for objectification at the time because I was friggin' like 12 or 13 years old, but that's what it was. So it was this, but something in me, right? Like knew that what's going on here? So it was this interesting conflict of feeling like I had accomplished something, but like, had I? And this feels weird, but is it good? Like so confusing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And the culture, right? So validated by the culture, because if we just blindly follow the culture, I should have been real pumped, like,
You're right.
All right, I won, you know? But it was like, is this something I want to be winning? Should this be even happening?
It's so interesting. Like I find it very fascinating to contemplate those early stories. And I'm glad you brought it up because, some of us sort of went through like the status quo. Like I was not particularly developed at any sort of early age. I didn't feel like I got crazy attention in that way. Although I always had like a big round Jewish butt and everybody says I have the body of a sister. And I still get that today. And I'm kind of like, I don't know exactly like why you have to compare my butt to any particular culture or any particular like definition of a butt.
Yeah, that's actually pretty offensive.
I know. And I get that a lot. And so I'm contemplating like the comments that come at you like all the time. And how are you supposed to respond? I'm like, it's the butt I was given, and the comments of like being a Jewish woman. And since I was young, like the comments about my nose and like what that starts to say. And then knowing like my mother and my grandmother and all the aunts, like everybody has had nose jobs. I was the first one not to have one. And it's so interesting, like to contemplate where these stories and these little moments start to inform your own embodiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. I think we all have our versions of these stories. And I'm sure those listening to this interview are going to be like, this is my story. Oh yeah, I have that version.
Well, and what was also part of it was I remember my friend, it was my one friend who was telling me and my other friend about this, and she didn't win. And so then I also had the experience of seeing how she felt like shame and insecurity. And it felt like at my expense, even though it wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was also, and again, did I have the language for any of this at 12 years old? No. But it was also this thing of pitting women against each other, right? Or elevating one experience over another. You know what I mean? Based on whose beauty standard. You know what I mean? One of the things that's been really healing for me, actually, I've been single for a little over 3 years now. And after my relationship, I took 1.5 years off from dating. I labeled it being delightfully without consort. It was great because I'd been in relationships for almost like 11 years straight, So I was like, oh, this is great. And I was originally going to take 1 year off. And then I was like, let's just keep this rolling. And it ended up being 1.5 years. But then when I started dating again, one of the things, my body had really changed. From the last time I was single, I had gained 30 pounds. And, numbers are all relative. So, for me, that just meant I was like thicker, curvier, less muscular and like fitness trainer looking and more like, I don't know what to tell you, like Botticelli, like thicker, like more belly, more thigh, So what was fascinating to me was to look at these insecurities I had around, will men even be attracted to me now? Based on this early programming, right? That what I was before was the best thing or the right thing to be. And then realizing still, like for whatever you are, someone out there really, that's their favorite thing.
Absolutely.
And who the hell's business is that anyway, you know?
Well, just to validate that, when I asked my husband what was the first thing that he noticed about me and liked about me physically, my nose.
It's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Of course.
I know. It makes me so happy because I'm like, it's just to back up your point. It's like these things that limit us from that embodiment of like really loving just what we're made of. It's such a block of our own ability to like breathe.
Yeah.
Really.
Or even like, and I always tell people like the first step is always acceptance, right? Even if you can't get to love, can you get to like? Before you can get to like, can you just accept? Right? Can you just accept it? One of the funniest things, kind of like your nose thing, I was on a date with a guy and we had become affectionate with each other. And if anything on my body at the time I was still a little self-conscious about, it was like that under the bra roll in the back, you know? And this shit's not going away. You know, I just do not desire to live a life that would like, and behave the way I would need to behave and have the discipline I would need to have for that to go away. Right. So I've just like surrendered to it. But if anything, I was so self-conscious about that. And he literally reached around my back and was like, "Ooh, do you have this?" Finds the roll, grabs it. And he's like, "This is my favorite thing." And I'm like, "For real?" I'm like, "Listen, there's something for everybody. Like, I'm done judging anything on me. Somebody wants it."
That is amazing. I love that. You know what's interesting is coming to mind as you're talking, Elizabeth? It's like, there's I've definitely interviewed a lot of people in this podcast that are working with people who have, eating disorders and real residual pain about their bodies from abuse. And then I feel like there's this whole other sort of wavelength, which is probably a really nice section of women, which is where I consider myself one of them. We're not, thank God, we've never been the out and out abused and I've never had an out and out eating disorder. And I think I got through that literally by the skin of my teeth because I was a dancer and I was a yogi and I was surrounded by it every which way. But something in my makeup and my upbringing, it just never fully went that direction.
Yeah.
And yet we are all of us in those moments about our butts, our nose, the roll, whatever. And I think about the burdens that we just like quietly walk around and carry and where the limitations stem. It's like, I think I'm trying to say we put a ton of attention on the people who have out and out gone through like the acute pain. And then there's those of us that are sort of like, walking with the burden quietly and what that means and what that effect is. And to me, that has such a wide effect on the way that we're able to operate.
Yeah. And one of these things, I don't remember who said it or where I first heard this, but like, there's no hierarchy of pain or suffering.
No.
The most extreme thing that's ever happened to me might pale in comparison to somebody else's, but why are we comparing our wounds? What does that actually accomplish? Like, we can honor individual paths, right? Because this isn't about one-upsmanship. This isn't about, we're literally we have our own experiences we're carrying in our own. And again, there's no better than, worse than, this, that, or the other thing, because each person who's had whatever experience will make something different out of it, right? Like when you were talking, I was thinking like, yeah, that just wasn't part of your path, right? That wasn't what needed to inform who you were to become and what you were to do in the world, right? Whereas some people, like, they needed to have those experiences so they could, birth a body of work or become an activist or, heal themselves so they could heal ancestral stuff in their lineage and break patterns of abuse. Like, who knows, right? So even that in itself, like looking at that inclination to like compare is always super fascinating to me, because that's also very ingrained in our culture.
Totally. I think I bring it up not to compare so much to say like, it's really more of a universal thing than we realize. And as women, we're all carrying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about, there's so many things I want to talk about, but let's just jump into some deeper talks about women and about actualizing our connection to the divine, to the deeper, because I can honestly say that in my experience of talking to women over and over, I feel like that deeper sense of support, not the support that can come necessarily from another human, but that faith, that understanding, that connection to that which is beyond the physical, and how we cultivate that for ourselves is something that can be hard to verbalize and hard to embody. And I feel like you have some things to talk about there.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I teach my people is how to speak their own body's unique language of the senses. I call it your embodied language, right? To start mapping and noticing, what do you feel and where do you feel it, right? To learn the difference. At the time that we're recording this interview, it's early November 2019. And I recently, just a couple weeks ago, published the Wild Soul Movement Embodiment Bible. And it's like 23 pages. This could be a whole book. This could be a book of a couple hundred pages. So it was hard to narrow down like the most essential basics. But, one of the things that I really wanted to distinguish between was the difference between feelings, emotions, and then just like feeling states, like feelings are really like the sensations, right? I feel tingly, I feel hot, I feel, there's a buzzing in my chest or there's butterflies in my stomach. That's like feelings. Those are sensations. I feel these things happening, right? The feeling states are like, I feel calm, I feel content, I feel peaceful. And then emotions are like, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, because they all intersect, right? Sometimes when an emotion comes with like feelings and sensations, right? And can precipitate like a state of being or whatever. So when we learn to speak our own body's unique language of the senses, we're able to become emotionally literate. There's a popular phrase that people use a lot these days, which is I'm all up in my feelings, or I'm feeling all the feels, which is a really vague way to describe that you're having an emotional experience, but without actually getting the content of it, right? Like, well, what are you feeling? Or is there even emotional content? Are you having some anxiety and that's what it is? Or like, what's really going on? Can we parse these things out so that we can, if there's some information we need, if there's a practice or a tool we can reach for to feel better, if there's something useful that we can map out to discover, why do I feel this way? Is it the environment? Is it this person? Is it this thing that just happened? Like, is there something I need to change in my experience so I don't have to have this experience? Or is there something I need to cultivate because this is an enjoyable experience and I want more of it in my life? So I like to teach people how to engage with their senses, their feelings, and their emotions so that they can be more discerning about what's going on in their inner world and their outer world so they can make better choices day in and day out. Does that make sense?
Totally. So then what happens then? Like, let's say someone is able to just make that discernment. Then what is the possibility?
One of the biggest that is a hot topic I notice in our circles these days is boundaries, right? So when you are able to go, oh, I notice I consistently feel super drained after I spend time with that person. I don't need to spend as much time with that person anymore, if at all, right? Or I notice that when I go to that place, I always feel funky. That's not my place. I don't need to go there anymore. You know what I mean? Or, you know what? Whenever I'm around that person, I feel so alive. I would like to cultivate a deeper relationship with this person. Or, whatever it is. For people who run businesses, this kind of client, I always tend to feel this way. Maybe I need to tweak who I'm working with, or, whatever it is. Or, people who have kids. You have a lot of moms, right?
Yeah. I was going to get there in the conversation. Don't worry.
Especially because I'm not a parent, but I've worked with so many moms over the years. I feel like I get the experience by osmosis, especially because when you don't have kids, moms will tell you all kinds of shit that they won't tell other moms because I can't judge them because I don't have kids, right? So sometimes I get the like deeper inside scoop. But something that's pretty universally known for anyone who's like tapped into the psychology of raising kids is when your kid is at whatever age they're at, it's totally going to poke into your unresolved stuff when you were their age. So to be present with your own experience while they're having theirs. So first of all, you don't like counter transfer your own stuff onto your kid, but also so you can notice that you're having an experience and deal with it yourself,
Right. It's been coming up for me the whole time. I was kind of just like baiting my breath until I asked you about it, but we're here. When you talk about embodiment and women, I feel like what I hear all the time in so many conversations is that a woman can think that she's embodied before she has kids. And then there is this, for many people, not all, but for many people, there's a break in that. And I think that I now, 2 kids later and having so many deep, soulful conversations with so many women, can say, I definitely understand how that can happen. And it's that fusion between the physical body, the mental and emotional challenges, the change of identity that kind of goes with all of that. But I think that so many people that are going to listen to this conversation would be so interested in your insights about moments like that, the shift into parenthood, the physical experience, and then that stepping forward into this next phase, and why it's so tough, why it's so hard, and like maybe how to start thinking a different way about that.
Totally. I love this so much. Well, and I've had a lot of women have babies over the years in Wild Soul Movement. One of my women a couple of years ago even had her son on my birthday. It was so funny. And they use their practices in labor. They use their practices throughout birth. They use their practices when they were at doctor's appointments and doctors were trying to bully them into making choices they knew weren't right for them or their baby. By staying connected to themselves, noticing their sensations, their feelings, what was coming up, and the truth that was really bubbling up in their bodies. So it's been cool to see women who have these deep embodiment practices and they use them throughout, right? And it goes deeper than just like a yoga practice or, whatever. It's something that's really integrating, like Wild Soul Movement does, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, on all of those levels, metaphysical even in some cases. And so there's a couple things that really need to be acknowledged. That first of all, the narrative that a lot of people attach to of get your body back after a baby, that body is gone. That body didn't birth a person, no matter how that occurred, right? And you don't need that body back. That body served you well, and this new body did a whole different thing. So there's that acceptance piece again, right? But there's also that so many people have birth trauma. And one of the big things that happens when we have trauma is disassociation. Some people leave the body because it was like the most intense physical thing ever. And so many people, I'm sure you've had so many conversations with people about, so many people have a plan and are deeply attached to how their birth will go and how they want it to go. And I mean, how often does it absolutely not go?
Oh yeah, most of the time. It's very different.
It's so rare. Most of my girlfriends have very traumatic. It's like occasionally you get that one who's like, no, I was in and out. It happened at home in a tub and exactly. Great. Right? So rare, right? I had my kid in my living room in a bathtub. Great. Or like a blow up hot tub, whatever. So
all the things.
So there's so much attached to, first of all, the birth experience. And how many people then don't have the time or the resources, even in some cases, resources not just being like money, but time, energy, attention, access, even understanding or awareness of what their options are of like healing the trauma after, because they're just immediately in survival mode. Because this is the other thing that's wild to me, that people just assume a woman knows how to be a mother just because a baby came out and it's in her arms now. I never knew until my friends started having babies how complicated breastfeeding is and the latch and the supply and like there's a million friggin' things.
Hey everybody, save the date for our next live podcast event. This is going to be a good one. This time we are talking about stress. Whoa, it's a big one. The fact is we are all stressed out. Stress has become a normal state of mind, one we all deep down detest, but have also become so accustomed to. What is this level of stress doing to our mind, body, and soul? We experience stress's heavy hand in the form of anxiety, low libido, autoimmune issues, infertility, and an overall sense of disconnection from ourselves and our planet. We seek respite in a myriad of ways, but a deep exhale is hard to come by. As you know, here at the Going Beyond podcast, we don't run away from the tough stuff. We dive in to seek solutions, to seek connection, and to find our power. They say that the only way out is through, but how exactly do we power through something as massive as our stress level? So, here at the Going Beyond podcast, we are psyched to tell you that our next live event is going to be on February 13th here in New York City at Athleta Flatiron. who were our gracious host at our last successful live event. And we're going to be bringing game changers who are choosing calm over stress, health over breakdown, and tools over helplessness. We're going to be joined by experts, coaches, founders, brilliant individuals who are tackling the myriad of ways that stress is harming us and sharing with us the way that they're reinventing a pathway toward a better life. Gather with us to talk deeply about the realities of our stressed out lives, and let's invite in the wisdom of those choosing another path forward. We can't wait for this one. I am so excited, and we know it's going to be a game changer event for all of us. If you're curious about our last live podcast event, listen to our audio. It is here on the Going Beyond podcast, and I hope it will inspire you to save the date and, of course, to get your ticket as soon as they go live. Yes. And your perceived success and failure of those things
that's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
And that really breaks a lot of people's trust with their body. If their body is not performing the way they think it should, which is just obscene and ridiculous to put any kind of expectation like that onto your miraculous vessel that just made a person. So there's so much nuance and so many layers to how this separation happens. And then a lot of people, this, they really can't come up to air until that kid goes to school.
Oh yeah. 100%.
It's like I know people who are like, oh my God, the kid went to preschool. I got 3 hours a day to myself. I'm going to sleep or something. Like, I don't even know what to do. And again, even that, not everyone has that luxury because some people just have to go right back to work. So a lot of it has to do with people not having the time, space, tools, access, resources to actually process and integrate everything that occurs.
I know. I feel it so deeply. Something so interesting happened, and I think this is just like being an empath, but it's also that the journey of parenthood, womanhood, selfhood just continues to evolve so deeply at every moment and every phase. I mean, my kids are 7 and 3. So, most people might look and say, oh, well, you're over the hump. You're over the hump. But, the letting go over and over and over, and the presence that you must hold when your 7-year-old is asking you some very tough, real questions and what that brings up. I mean, there's so much there. And for me, it continues to be highly emotional in a good way, like meaning I'm feeling my way through the process. And I'm so in touch with that. Like earlier this morning, a woman I know, like very distantly, asked me to meet for just a quick, and this woman has a 14-month-old. Her current position, she went back to it, but the company had just drastically changed, and it was really kind of abusive from what she told me. And she left the position, and she's now trying to figure out what's next. And I felt so called to just get her to actually, it's a lot of what you're saying, Elizabeth. It's like, slow down and recognize that you have only been a mother for 14 months, and you're trying to figure out how to be a mother, how to be a woman, and how to be a person that gets back into your career in a way that feels meaningful. All of this is happening at the same time. And as we got to talking, like I felt myself getting really emotional because I think that women don't even have the space to feel the emotion of that.
Totally.
So I'm feeling it for them. But
yeah,
it's like there's so much there that we're just not giving space for.
And you know what a big piece of it is? Actually, when you said selfhood, I wrote down here so we can come back to it, grief.
Oh, well, that's
how many people most of us, unless you're connected to like your heritage and your culture and your lineage, and you somehow honor rites of passage, which a lot of modern people don't. How many people don't process like that they got married? Okay. And their single life is over for now, right? Or forever. And then, okay, you're going to have a kid. All right. Your pre-baby life over, okay, now your mother. And each stage, I have a little niece now, she's 16 months and I live on the West Coast. My family lives on the East Coast. I'm going home way more. I'm going home like 4 or 5 times a year now. So I don't miss these stages. Because every 3 months, she's a different person. She's walking. She's starting to say things. Like I'm missing things, like they FaceTime me all the time, which is cool. But like even that grief, that little baby that just laid on your chest and fell asleep, that only lasted for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And it's gone. Like you're never going to get that back. These moments, it always reminds me of, do you know who Jason Silva is?
Yeah, I do.
So he started his YouTube channel, I think in like 2012. And like one of the very first videos was called The Existential Bummer. And I love it because it's like so true. It was just like emphasizes the impermanence of everything, even when like you're falling in love. Like when we are first falling in love with someone or something or whatever, part of that intensity we feel is the grief of knowing that someday it's going to be over.
Totally.
Because all of these things coexist. And this is also a big thing that I talk about with my women all the time, is that we can feel multiple things at a time. We can feel joy, we can feel love, we can feel grief. We can be raging and feel compassion at the same time.
Yes.
Most people are like, well, if I'm angry, I can't be happy. Sometimes we're both.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
But it's confusing.
Yeah. Unless you accept the truth of it as a concept. But
and it's all a little paradoxical. And it all comes back to like what we were saying earlier. If you are tuned in with your senses and stuff, you could be like, oh, my energy, I actually feel great. And I got some rage inside of me. So now that I could distinguish between the two, what can I do with this rage? Can I channel it into something today? Do I need to go work out? Do I write something? Like, am I an artist? Am I going to create something with this? Like, we can then make these things useful and channel the energy into something, or just be better at feeling our feelings and letting them, process through and then move on without creating all kinds of meaning and story around it and blowing it out of proportion.
From my 2 cents, I think part of the issue of why that paradox that you're talking about, that I can feel everything at the same time and it's all true, part of why it's so difficult is because we have this belief system that everything is as it is today and that's how it's going to stay. And and there's nothing that traps you harder than trying to live life like that. And just from some recent things that I can speak to that on, and then I'm sure you can like tag team with me here. It's like I think about, I lost my dad in an accident 14 years ago, and grief has been a huge part of my life and a huge informer of everything that I am and everything I've become. And the journey of learning who I am in relationship to that grief and to that fact that that happened, it is incredibly paradoxical because there's not a day that goes by that I don't wish that had never happened. And yet the sheer fact that it did happen is why I have everything I have, and I am who I am, and I have the husband I have and the babies I have. And I can't separate it.
Totally.
And it's all true.
Yeah.
And then every year I use it as a moment, whether it's the anniversary of his death or his birthday or something. And I tell some kind of story on, social media, which is a beautiful way to sort of share the expression or the journey of it. And every year what I want to talk about or what I want to share or process is different. It's from a different angle, and this year I posted pictures of him holding me as a baby. And I was contemplating who he was when I was born. And another year I can contemplate about just how much I miss him. It changes all the time. And so it is not linear. It is not controlled. It is everything. And I would say as well, because this is more of like a living example, as is my relationship. My husband and I are together 10 years this November. And I'm like, whoa, this is a moving, breathing, living organism.
Everything is. That's the trick.
That's the trick. And I feel like we're literally entering the next 10 years, and it's letting go of some very hard, painful things in order to reinvigorate and
Yes.
redefine,
Yes.
based on him being 50 and me being 40 and 10 years has passed and now what? And that vulnerability is so hard and so powerful.
And it's so real. It's like, this is what life is for. It's so raw.
Yeah. So raw. And I think like, it's so scary. And I think like I want to give voice to that too. Like the feeling of that being so naked.
Totally.
It's not easy. There's so much emotion and so much just like I just want to like cry and like run away sometimes.
I hear you. I'm like, I just go move to an island and sell coconuts. Sometimes I'm like, how do I set up my coconut backup plan? In my single phase here that I've been enjoying for the last couple of years, the paradox is the starkness of sometimes being alone, but with my spiritual practice, simultaneously knowing I'm never alone. And realizing how sometimes a phase that I really completed was just realizing that often my attachment or like I am inclined to romanticize, right? Like I'll romanticize these people I meet. And I learned instead of romanticizing the actual man in front of me to romanticize the divine, right? Because I'm like, ultimately I'm wanting to merge with God. And I'm hoping this person is going to be like the instrument, the vessel through which I am able to do that, right? By the way, no pressure, guys.
You need to be God.
No pressure. I just need you to be Jesus, all right?
Yeah. So meet me at the restaurant.
I know.
And be God when you get there.
Don't forget to be your most conscious, evolved, divine, masculine self. No, but also, so then that takes the pressure off the person and then just like letting whatever is available. Like I say this prayer all the time, use me, move me, and make me a force for expansion, for love, and for good. And what I'm essentially surrendering to when I say that prayer every morning is, make me a vessel, like use me. I'm an instrument. What needs to happen today through me? And so I also now am able to see these people in front of me as the vessel for me, right? God's trying to love on me through this person in whatever way is available. So I no longer have to be so attached to an outcome, a relationship. And I'm in a different position because I don't want kids. So I'm 36 and I don't have like that biological clock ticking on me, which I know for some people puts a different kind of like pressure and timeline. I don't have that. But it's really lovely to also just allow myself, like I fall in love so easily. I can find something to love about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People are so amazing, or they're also just like so wounded and unworkable for me that I'm like, God bless you. I got to go because I'll get dragged under by this. But like, I wish you the best, and like when they pop into my mind, I'm like doing a meditation and like sending them love. And I'm like, I hope they're okay. And I never want to see that person again in my life. Like this is a different way for the paradox to occur. But it comes back to this, I can hold all these things at once. Yeah. I can be available. Like I can fall in love 100 times this year, right? And end up with someone or not end up with someone. But it kind of goes back to something we were saying in the beginning, which is I am fully in and fully living and fully experiencing my life.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's the ultimate goal. Like, why else are we here?
Well, exactly. I have two questions on that. I mean, one, I would say yes to that. And I think like what I'm experiencing and the phrase that keeps coming to me, especially like going into this deeper place in my relationship. If you asked me like 5 years ago, are you like holding back something? I might have said no, but now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I actually have been. And now I feel like I'm kind of defrosting something. It's like a defrost. And that word is so interesting to me because like it indicates that like, yeah, a piece of me has been frozen out of fear or some sort of controlled version of myself or making something bad not happen or whatever. And it's very powerful and scary and frightening and all the things to start the defrost. So just saying that. But the other thing that I wanted to ask, like when you talk about, I want to be in a relationship with God or like express divinity through the love that's going to come into my life, which I think is what you're kind of saying. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for you? What does that feel like for you?
So I'll give you an example. There was a man I met earlier this year who I noticed every time I would hang out with him, I would feel very similarly to how I felt with my ex. And he didn't have all these similar qualities, except that he was very emotionally underdeveloped and had a lot of wounding that was just unaddressed. So he wasn't toxic or anything like that. He just would have like these outbursts or would like emotionally dump on me. And I would be like, I just worked all day. I work with clients. Like I held space for people all day. Like I didn't give you permission. I didn't have a bandwidth for it, and then I'd leave like, ugh. So I stopped seeing him, but there were so many great things about him. And then about, let's say almost 6 months later, we, in an interesting way, kind of circled back. So we're back in each other's lives now. And he has shifted. I have shifted. And now I like really enjoy being around him. In fact, I feel super safe. I can relax. He's much more intense than I am, which is great. Like rarely is anyone more intense than me. So I feel like, I'm like, great, you be the intense one. Like I'll relax, And so that looks like at this juncture in my life, enjoying that I can be soft with this person. And that's it. Like ultimately, do I want a partnership again? I do, but someone would really have to be so extraordinary for me to want to commit. So in the meantime, am I going to miss out on connection or companionship or experiencing these things that are kind of pointing me towards ultimately what I would want in a whole package? No. I need these clues. I need these felt, because this comes back to the embodiment, actually. There have been several men I've dated in the last year that I knew weren't for me, but I spent time with them to attune myself to the couple of things that they really embodied that I wanted, that I needed to get used to. So this man is a very big energy. He's very ambitious, very powerful, very successful. I really respect and admire the work he's doing in the world. And I'm like, this is cool. This is cool for me to attune myself to being around this kind of energy, because this is something I want to align myself with. So like these other things, they're negotiable because they're not deal breakers. They're not ideal, but for the time being, and I'm willing to let things unfold and evolve now versus before, where I used to fall in love with potential all the time and then think that I could miraculously heal or change someone. Now I'm like, I'm not. So the one thing I don't do anymore is if I can't accept someone exactly the way they are, I don't engage. They don't need to meet up, right? Because I'm not like trying to accept them to be my life partner. I'm just accepting them to be the person I'm currently journeying with on the adventure,
Yeah. Yes, I love that. And I agree. I also went through a breakup before I met my husband, and I had a handful of months that were super fun.
Oh my God. I know people only have the audio, but I need to tell them the way that you kind of like paused and this, like, I could just see like those couple of months, the experiences flashing before your eyes, like the satisfaction on your face was so, I hope everyone has experiences that they can make a face like that about in their life.
Exactly. Yes, I'm glad. See, this is why I like to record with the visual, because we get to see each other and see those funny little things.
So great.
It was such a cool period because I got to experience who I was at that point. It actually reminded me a lot of what you talked about when you started dating again and your body was different. And it's like, how am I like showing up in this space in my life? Very similar, like, who am I dating now? How am I holding myself? Who's attracted to me? Who am I attracted to?
Yes.
And I went out with like all these guys and let myself just like play the field. But I was very consciously noting what I was definitively attracted to about each guy.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to start using, I guess, a form of manifestation, because I mean, that word is so used a lot now, but it's like, I was like, oh, this guy is super intellectually brilliant. And I love that about him. All the other like stuff, not so great, but I really love that quality. And this guy is this like all over the place. He's like waitering, and I don't really know what he's doing, but he's a yogi and he has that like spirituality side. And I like so love that. I just eat it up with a spoon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all these people I was going out with. And then I started to like really kind of envision the individual based on these qualities that I saw were really important. And it's not to say that I manifested my husband, but I will say that when I met him, I could recognize those qualities immediately.
Yes. This is what I mean by attunement. It is a manifestation, because part of actual real manifestation is the ability to get into the feeling state of already having the thing that you want. Yeah. Right. So if you know what it felt like to be in the spiritual aspect of the yogi guy and in the intellectual aspect of the brilliant guy, when it's there, You feel it. One of the ways I've described this, it's like I'm gathering the ingredients for a recipe. I don't have the recipe yet, but I have a lot of ingredients.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I love that. Because I feel like you're so beautifully articulating this period and this time in your life. Like, I love it. What would you say to the woman that is where you are, but maybe does want children and is feeling that pressure?
Yeah. The biggest thing that will repel the thing that you want is not accepting that you don't have it yet. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Beating yourself up, making yourself wrong, thinking that timing is wrong, any regret, any energy around that you missed out on anything. You really didn't, right? If it was meant, like, I really do firmly believe this phrase, like, what is for you cannot pass by you. So getting to the place of fully accepting where you are, I think is so valuable and like excited. So whatever people's terminology is, God, the universe, the divine, the great beloved, I love this saying, like, wait till you see what God has planned for you. I love that so much. So if or when, and it's rare for me now, but still happens sometimes, I ever feel like I should be experiencing something I'm not yet. Yet is a big word, right? As well. I'm like, wait till you see. I'll like have that conversation. I'm like, you wait, you freaking wait. And here's your evidence, right? Just think of the other areas in your life where something came together in like a miraculous, surprising, or even super mundane way that you were like, oh, that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. Or like, whatever, or damn, I really had to earn that one. Or like, whatever. Be like, okay. I personally, the more anyone could get on board with the divine unfoldment of things and just be in like the full acceptance of like how it is right now, appreciating and acknowledging what you already have and just like putting one foot in front of the other and doing whatever you need to do to be available for the next best step to present itself. For me, that's like the way to live. Surrender and trust, allowing, right? Because otherwise you're going to torture yourself and just kind of simmer in this energy that isn't really a receptive and available energy anyway for what you actually want. Does that make sense?
Totally. I think about it also as in, because it can be, I think, confusing sometimes in our very kind of like spiritualized world in terms of some of the language that we use. And people are like, wait, what exactly does that mean? And it can sometimes indicate that we're supposed to be so trusting in the universe and in God that we're not supposed to do anything. Well, no, that's not true either.
Gotta move your feet while you pray.
That's right. Perfect quote. I think of it as I'm creating conditions for what I want. And the conditions doesn't mean that I have to force the result, but I'm creating the conditions. And that means I cultivate healthy body and healthy mental state, and I'm connecting spiritually, and I'm being loving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I love is if you create conditions, it's like you're less attached to the ultimate outcome. It's like fertile ground. Mm-hmm. And it always brings me back to one of my favorite quotes from I would say like the founding yoga teacher in my life. If you've ever met her, you'll love her. Dana Trixie Flynn, founder of Laughing Lotus. She's mostly an East Coaster, but she's a powerhouse. And she once said years ago in a class, it always stuck with me, do the work, put that in. You have to show God how hard you're working, but leave just enough room to be surprised.
I love that.
It's so right on, because it's like, we can't force the results. Like we have to like be sort of like you said, yet, like be excited for what you don't know yet.
Yeah. Cause our human minds are very limited. And so I love, there's some like old school metaphysicians who I love, and Florence Scovel Shinn is one of them. And in a lot of her like prayers and affirmations, they end with under grace in perfect ways. So it'll be like, I'm super thankful that like all of my needs are always taken care of by the divine under grace in perfect ways, or under grace in miraculous ways. Or I trust that this is being handled by the divine under grace in a miraculous way. And I love that because it's similar to like asking for what you want and adding on that little or something better, because there's actually something really genuinely humble about being like, or something better. Like maybe I don't know what's best. Like maybe there's something far greater than I could even imagine, which is why what I want isn't here, because something better is queuing up for me. And personally, I just would rather live with that mindset and that attitude. It's more fun for me.
Totally.
It leaves room for the mystery. It feels more exciting. And then it's like my eyes to see, my ears to hear are always peeled for like, how does life maybe want to show me?
Well,
that there's something better in store.
You mentioned synchronicities before. I feel like this is the sort of like state where synchronicities start to come in. So like, tell us a little bit about how synchronicities work.
I'll tell you a story actually related to this man. When I originally met him, I'd been doing a lot of online dating and I had deleted my apps and I was like, I want to meet someone. My friend Rachel calls it out in the wild. I want to meet someone out in the wild. So I was on my way home from a lunch date with a friend of mine on the other side of town. And I was going to stop in a coffee shop on the way home. I had a book with me. I was going to read. I was going to journal, blah, blah, blah. I realized that I didn't have my wallet with me. So I instead went to grab my coffee from this grocery store, Erewhon here that we have in LA.
I'm obsessed with Erewhon. I want to roll out a cot there. And
it is worth being obsessed with because I knew they had like the Apple Pay, like I could pay with my phone. So went on this whole detour. And that's where I happened to meet this man out in the wild. Like he literally plucked me out of the grocery store. And there were like a whole bunch of, cause like I was originally going to go to this other coffee. I wasn't going to stop there. The timing of my day had changed as well. Like there were all these factors that landed me in that place at that time. And just like several other synchronicities. He ended up living in a place right on the water, right by me, where actually I had been filming my videos all year. Like directly out in front of his house that he had been in for months. And
wow.
We had never crossed paths. So like there were all these interesting little synchronicities. And then when we reconnected, the reason we had reconnected was because I had joined a gym that I knew he went to. And so I just sent him a text to be like, hey, I joined your gym. I just wanted to send a text to say, hey, preempt any potential awkwardness if we run into each other. Because I'm not into, I don't want to walk into my gym and have to be like looking around. You know, I just wanted to like extend the olive branch. And he was like, yeah, it'll be good to run into you when I get home. He was traveling. And then I didn't talk to him for like 3 weeks. The first time I stepped foot in the gym, 3 hours later, he texts me. He was there. I hadn't even been there yet. And I was like, you just missed me by 3 hours. I didn't tell him that like it was the same. So it was like the same day. And so to me, that's God just like winking at me being like, listen, there's something to this connection. Just like stay engaged until you see what it is, you know? So it might, some people might be like, confirmation bias. You're just blah, blah, blah. Listen, this makes life more fun for me.
Totally.
I would much rather be like, listen, we could think that's a coincidence. You know, nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle.
I go with the miracle mindset. Definitely.
I like it.
Definitely. I mean, my husband and I met in a coffee shop and we have absolutely no one in common. It was Thanksgiving weekend. I'm never in New York on Thanksgiving. He had moved to New York only a few months before. Like the fact that a light could have been red or green and changed us to go another direction, or
100%
could have plopped down to read in any other place. So could have he, like, we might have never known each other. And I like to believe that the universe was bringing us together. And my cute son, he's such a loon. He's so intense, but he has this like incredibly delicious, empathic soul. And he said to me the other day that before he was born, I tell him they were like in the fairy world or whatever. And he's like, yeah, he goes, I made sure that you and daddy met so that you could be my parent. And I was like, okay, after I'm done like yelling at you, I'm going to eat you alive because you're so cute.
That's adorable. And he probably did.
He probably did. And that's my point.
He was like, these two, I need them. I love it.
Yeah, it's so darn cute. Anyway.
And again, like, look at the joy. Like, how much fun is it? People might not resonate with it. That's cool. You don't have to. You know, we're not being dogmatic about this, but brings more joy and curiosity and awe to my life. So this is how I'm going to live it.
I love it. So before we do say goodbye, a couple of things. I would love for you to give like a couple of tips to those listening that want to start a process of being more connected, more embodied, and more able to discern the myriad of things that might be going on all at once in their daily life.
Listen, the easiest, much easier and more valuable than that would be if they just go download that embodiment Bible. It's literally 23 pages. It's the simplest, most basic. There's 4 concepts and 2 practices that are just the easiest, best place to start. And so if they go to wildsoulmovement.com/Bible, they can download the Wild Movement Embodiment Bible. It's free. You can unsubscribe right afterwards if you want to. It doesn't matter to me. But there's some really good foundational stuff in there that is much more thorough than anything I could just spit out here in like the last 90 seconds, you know?
What's the website again? Say it one more time.
wildsoulmovement.com/Bible, Bible.
Thank you. And where else can we follow you and everything you're doing?
Instagram. Instagram is the place where I hang out on the socials because I have one of those little convenient links in my bio that'll take you everywhere else. Akashic Records readings, Wild Movement Weekend workshops, teacher training, podcast episodes, all the things live at that little link in my Instagram bio. So my Instagram is just my name, Elizabeth DiAlto.
Oh yeah. And before we go, tell everyone about your podcast. Hello.
Oh, it's called Truth Telling. Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. I essentially invite people on to explore my own curiosities. And the thing that I say is where we come together to explore the truth that's always evolving within us and around us. So full range of topics from love, sex, relationships, money, spirituality, psychology, social justice, activism, like all these things. So, and you know, the podcast, if it's 2020, by the time this goes live, we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary, close to 350 episodes. So I always joke, it's kind of like, you know how like there's an app for that? We're like, there's an episode for that. Like if someone asks me something, I'm like, go in the archives. There's like 5 episodes for that, you know?
Yeah, totally. I love that. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you. This was so fun.
So fun. And as always, and I think back to the theme of this entire conversation, when we trust what's coming up, we step into it and good things arise. And I'm so glad I approached you that night and you were like, yes. And then we were like, yes. And then here we are. And then everyone else gets to enjoy what we enjoyed. It's amazing.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Anyone listening, if you want to find me on Instagram and say hi, please do. I answer my DMs.
Yes, you do. I can vouch for that.
Yep. I love it.
Well, Elizabeth,
all right, Mama, thank you so much.
Thank you. And to those of you who tuned in, I appreciate you. Give this podcast the love that I know it deserves. Give it some stars, give it some good ratings, and share it with those that you love. I really do commit to conversations that I really believe are going to make your life better. And it's sometimes just that simple. So thank you. Take care of you. And see you next time. Bye.